Have you ever accepted a job because you had no other choice? I did, and if I had known what waited for me inside that building, I would have rather slept on the streets than spent a single night there. It all started with a strange online job listing. Overnight caretaker needed. Night shift only. Excellent pay. Follow the rules exactly. The salary was almost double what I had been making at my previous job. No experience was required, and the interview was scheduled for the very same evening. Desperate people don't ask many questions. I certainly didn't. The address led me far outside the city, where the roads grew narrower and the streetlights disappeared one by one. By the time I reached the location, my phone had completely lost signal. Standing in front of me was a massive concrete building surrounded by rusted fences and towering pine trees. There were no nearby houses, no passing cars, and no signs of life. A faded metal sign read only 2 words. Facility 14. The front doors opened before I even knocked. An elderly man wearing a gray security uniform waited behind a wooden desk. "You must be Daniel," he said calmly. I nodded, without another word. He placed a contract in front of me. The pay was unbelievable. I signed without reading the fine print. The old man smiled for the first time. "I hope you don't regret that." His words sent a strange chill through me. He handed me 3 things: an old flashlight, a heavy brass key, and a folded sheet of paper. "The flashlight never runs out of batteries," he said. "The key opens every locked door except one." "Which door?" He ignored the question. "Read the paper carefully." After saying that, he grabbed his coat and walked toward the exit. "Wait," I called after him. "Aren't you staying?" "My shift is over." "What if something happens?" He stopped at the doorway without turning around. "If something happens..." He paused for several seconds. "Follow the rules." Then he disappeared into the fog. I was completely alone. Curious, I unfolded the paper. At the top, someone had typed 3 words: night shift rules. Below were 12 numbered instructions. The first few immediately caught my attention. Rule 1, never enter room 8 after midnight. Rule 2, if you hear someone calling your name from room 8, keep walking. Rule 3, at exactly 1:13 a.m., every light in the building will go out for 1 minute. Stand completely still. Rule 4, if you see a woman in a white hospital gown facing the wall, do not look at her face. Rule 5, never use the elevator after 2 a.m. I couldn't help laughing. Who writes rules like these? It had to be some elaborate prank for new employees. I folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket, and began my first patrol. The building felt abandoned. Rows of empty offices stretched into darkness. Old hospital beds were stacked in storage rooms. Dust covered almost every surface, yet the floors looked freshly cleaned. The silence was unsettling. Even my footsteps sounded too loud. Hours passed without incident. By midnight, I had convinced myself the rules were nothing more than a joke. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks echoed somewhere upstairs. Knock, knock, knock. A woman's voice followed. "Hello?" I stopped walking. "Please help me." The sound came from the 2nd floor. For a moment, I forgot about the rules. Someone could actually be trapped up there. I climbed the stairs carefully, shining my flashlight down the hallway. The room numbers came into view. 5, 6, 7, then 8. The door was slightly open. The voice came again. "Daniel." I froze. I had never told anyone my name, not out loud. Yet whoever was inside room 8 knew exactly who I was. My hand slowly reached for the door. Just as my fingers touched the handle, I remembered the paper in my pocket. Never enter room 8 after midnight. I quickly stepped back. The crying stopped instantly. For several seconds, everything was silent. Then a deep voice, completely different from the woman's, whispered from inside the room. "Good." A second later, the lights throughout the entire building flickered once. I looked at my watch. 1:12 a.m. Only 1 minute remained before rule number 3. And somewhere inside room 8, something had just realized. I was still standing outside its door.
I couldn't take my eyes off my watch. 1:12 a.m. Only a few seconds remained before rule number 3. At exactly 1:13 a.m., Every light in the building will go out for 1 minute. Stand completely still.
Do not speak.
I backed away from room 8 as quietly as I could. The hallway felt colder than before. The voice inside never spoke again. Instead, I heard something much worse. A slow scratching sound, as if long fingernails were dragging across the other side of the metal door. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I wanted to run. Every instinct told me to get downstairs and leave the building. But the old man's final words echoed in my mind. If something happens, follow the rules. My watch ticked forward. 1:13 a.m. The lights instantly went out. Complete darkness swallowed the hallway. Not dim light, not shadows. Absolute blackness. Even my flashlight refused to turn on. I stood perfectly still. My breathing became louder than I wanted. For a few seconds, nothing happened.
Then,
Footsteps.
soft.
Bare feet walking across the hallway. They weren't coming from behind me. They were coming from inside room 8. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was standing only a few feet away. The air suddenly smelled like old hospital medicine mixed with something rotten. A woman's voice whispered softly, "Daniel?" I clenched my jaw. The rule was clear.
Do not speak.
The voice came again. This time it sounded like my mother. "Honey, it's okay." My heart nearly stopped. My mother had passed away 5 years ago. There was no way.
No.
This building was trying to trick me. The footsteps moved closer. I felt cold air brush across my face. Something was standing directly in front of me. I wanted to open my eyes wider, but it made no difference. The darkness was too thick. Then another voice spoke. A man's voice. The old security guard. "You broke Rule 1. I almost answered. Almost. But I stayed silent. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, the lights flickered back on. The hallway was empty. Room 8's door was closed. Everything looked completely normal. I let out the breath I'd been holding. "I made it," I whispered. The moment the words left my mouth, every light flickered once. A loud metallic ding echoed through the hallway. I slowly turned my head. The elevator doors were opening. I frowned. I hadn't called the elevator. Inside stood a little boy. He couldn't have been older than 8. He wore an old hospital gown several sizes too big. His head hung low, hiding his face. Then he spoke without looking up. "You're not supposed to talk after the lights come back." My blood ran cold. That wasn't one of the rules. Before I could react, the elevator doors slammed shut on their own. The display above the elevator changed. Instead of showing numbers, it displayed a single word.
Down.
Then the elevator began moving. Not up, not to another floor, just
Down.
far below the basement. I stared at the display until it disappeared. When I looked back at the hallway, something had changed. The paper with the rules was lying on the floor. I was certain it had been in my pocket. I picked it up. There was a sentence at the bottom that definitely hadn't been there before. "You have been noticed." I looked around the empty hallway. For the first time that night, I realized I wasn't guarding the building. The building was watching me. I couldn't stop staring at the new sentence on the paper. "You have been noticed." I was sure it hadn't been there before. My hands began to shake.
Who had written it?
More importantly, when I checked every page, the original 12 rules were still there. But now, beneath Rule 12, another instruction had appeared in faded black ink. Rule 13, if you see the woman in white, do not let her see your face. I swallowed hard. I didn't remember reading a Rule 13. A cold breeze swept through the hallway. Then, tap,
Tap. Tap.
footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor.
Slow. Steady.
Getting closer. I raised my flashlight. At the end of the hallway stood a woman wearing an old white hospital gown. Her long black hair covered most of her back. She wasn't moving. She was facing the wall. I immediately remembered Rule 4. If you see a woman in a white hospital gown facing the wall, do not look at her face. I lowered my eyes and slowly began walking away. The hallway was completely silent. No footsteps. No breathing. Nothing. I had only taken a few steps when I heard a soft voice behind me. Excuse me. I froze. The voice sounded gentle, almost kind. I think you dropped something. I didn't turn around. The rules existed for a reason. The voice came again. You don't have to be afraid. I kept walking. Then she laughed. It wasn't loud, just a quiet little laugh. But it didn't sound human. It sounded like several people laughing at the same time. My heart started pounding. I reached the staircase and hurried downstairs without looking back. The first floor felt different now. The temperature was warmer. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. Then I noticed muddy footprints on the floor. Small footprints. Bare feet. They stretched from the front entrance all the way toward the security office. I followed them carefully. The office door was open. Inside, the old security guard's desk looked exactly as before. Except, there was a photograph lying in the middle of the desk. I picked it up. The picture showed 5 security guards standing outside Facility 14. All of them were smiling. One by one, I looked at their faces. Then my stomach dropped. The last man in the photo was me. Same face. Same uniform. I had never worked here before. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back were 6 words. Night shift, October 18th, 1998. That was impossible. I wasn't even born in 1998. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. A whisper floated through the office. You finally found it. The voice wasn't behind me. It came from directly under the desk. Very slowly, something crawled into view. A pale hand. Its fingers were impossibly long. They wrapped around the edge of the desk. Then another hand appeared. Something was pulling itself out from the darkness beneath. I didn't wait to see the rest. I grabbed the photo and ran. As I reached the hallway, every emergency alarm in the building suddenly began blaring. Red lights flashed across the walls. For the first time all night, a voice echoed through the loudspeakers. Attention. Rule 4 has been broken. I stopped running. What? I never looked at her face. The announcement continued. She has looked at yours. The hallway fell silent. Behind me, I heard that same soft laugh. Only this time, it came from right over my shoulder. The laugh came from inches behind me. I didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to look, but I forced myself to keep my eyes forward. The hallway was empty. Or at least, it looked empty. The emergency lights continued flashing red, covering the walls in a blood-colored glow. Then the loudspeaker crackled again. Do not run. I froze. That wasn't one of the rules. Before I could decide what to do, another voice came through the speaker. It was the old security guard. Daniel, don't listen to it. I looked toward the security office. No one was there. The loudspeaker hissed. Then a different voice answered. You've already replaced him. A chill ran down my spine. Replaced him? Suddenly, every office door along the hallway creaked open at the same time. One after another. Creak, creak, creak. Inside each room, someone stood in complete darkness. They all wore the same gray security uniform. They all had their heads lowered. As the emergency lights flashed, they slowly lifted their faces. Every single one of them had my face. Dozens of Daniels stared at me, without blinking. Then, together, they smiled. Not a normal smile. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide, almost reaching their ears. One of them stepped into the hallway. Then another. Then another. I backed away slowly. No. They all spoke at once. You shouldn't have taken this job. I turned and ran. The loudspeaker screamed. Rule 14. I stopped. There had never been a Rule 14. The paper in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. I pulled it out. A new line had appeared. Rule 14. If you see yourself, never let yourself catch you. My heart pounded. Behind me, dozens of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Not running. Walking. Slowly. Confidently. As if they already knew I couldn't escape. I sprinted toward the staircase and slammed the heavy fire door behind me. The footsteps stopped instantly. Silence. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 gentle knocks came from the other side of the fire door. A familiar voice whispered, Daniel? It was my own voice. Open the door. Another knock. I forgot something. Another. Please. I covered my ears. This isn't real, I whispered. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. Then I heard something even worse. The sound of a key turning. Slowly, the fire door began unlocking from the other side. But I was the only one with a key. The handle slowly turned. The door opened just a few inches. A hand reached through the gap. It was my hand. Same watch. Same sleeve. Same scar across the knuckle. Then another hand gripped the edge of the door. My duplicate slowly leaned forward. He smiled. I've been waiting for your shift to end. Before I could move, every light in the building suddenly went out again. This time, my watch read 2 a.m. But Rule 3 only happened once. Or something had changed the rules. The darkness lasted only a few seconds. When the lights came back on, the hallway was empty. The duplicate was gone. The fire door stood wide open, gently swaying back and forth. I looked at my watch. 2:01 a.m. Something wasn't right. Rule 3 had clearly stated that the blackout happened only once at 1:13 a.m. So, why had the lights gone out again? I reached into my pocket and unfolded the rule sheet. My heart nearly stopped. The paper had changed. The first 12 rules were gone. Only one sentence remained. There is only one rule now. Below it, in dark handwriting, were 6 words. Survive until 6 in the morning. A loud bell echoed through the building. Somewhere above me, an old clock struck 2. Then a calm voice came over the loudspeaker. Night shift protocol has entered its final phase. The exits are now locked. I ran toward the main entrance anyway. The heavy steel doors refused to move. I shoved them with all my strength. Nothing. The windows were covered by thick metal shutters that hadn't been there earlier. I was trapped. Suddenly, every television screen inside the lobby turned on by itself. The screens showed grainy black and white security footage. At first, I thought they were displaying live camera feeds. Then I noticed something terrifying. Every screen showed me. Not the present me. Different versions of me. One was running through a hallway. Another was crying in the security office. One was pounding on the front door. And, on the last screen, I watched myself sitting calmly behind the reception desk, wearing the same gray uniform as the old guard. He slowly looked into the camera, then smiled. I lasted until sunrise, he said. But you won't. The screen went black. A cold hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. No one. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow.
Steady.
Not one person. Dozens. The hallway filled with figures wearing gray security uniforms. Every single one had my face. They weren't chasing me anymore. They were simply walking toward me, as if they knew there was nowhere left to run. I backed into the reception desk. My eyes landed on the old brass key. The guard had said it opened every door, except one. Room 8. An idea struck me. If everything in this place revolved around room 8, maybe that room wasn't keeping something inside. Maybe it was keeping something out. I grabbed the key and sprinted upstairs. The footsteps followed. The duplicates never hurried. They didn't need to. They knew exactly where I was going. I reached room 8. The door stood open. Inside was the same endless darkness. But this time, a voice spoke from within. You finally understand. I raised the brass key. It doesn't unlock this door. The voice laughed softly. It locks it. I slammed the key into the lock and turned it with all my strength. A deafening scream exploded from inside the room. The entire building shook violently. Every light burst. The walls cracked. The duplicate voices behind me screamed in unison before fading into silence. Then, everything stopped. Morning sunlight poured through the hallway windows. The fog outside had disappeared. The building looked old, abandoned, lifeless. The front doors slowly unlocked with a loud metallic click. I walked outside, without looking back. As I reached the parking lot, I saw the old security guard leaning against his truck. He smiled sadly. You made it. What was that place? I asked. He looked toward Facility 14. For one more night, he said quietly. It stayed closed. Before I could ask another question, he handed me a plain white envelope. Inside was my paycheck, exactly as promised, along with a small folded note. I unfolded it. It contained only one sentence. Thank you for completing your first shift. Report back tonight at 11 p.m. I stared at the building. The front doors slowly opened by themselves. Someone was standing inside. A man in a gray security uniform. He looked exactly like me. And this time, he smiled first. The end.